Hey, as we are in our series, The Story, we're looking at a lot of different aspects that I tried to give right up front to say, this is how we're going to approach understanding and interpreting what's written for us in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. So I gave four little rules. They're what's called hermeneutical rules. They're the rules by which literally it's true for any body of literature that we would read from history. You just don't read it and say, oh, this, I'm going to take Shakespeare and just understand that it's going to mean exactly the same thing for me. You got to understand the context that Shakespeare is written. And so there's interpretive rules about that. That's under the banner of hermeneutics, or literary understanding the literary genres. So there's four rules. The first one I gave you yesterday, which is the Bible is written for me, but not to me. So we must remember that the book of Genesis was written to the children of Israel coming out of bondage in Egypt. So there's a lot of nuances about that I've got to understand in order to make application for me. Because it wasn't written to me. It's written for me, but not to me. The second one is the Bible was written in different literary genres. So predominantly three genres. One, narrative, that's 43% of the Bible. Two is poetry, 33% of the Bible. And the last one is discourse, 24% of the Bible. Now add those up and you get 100%. Now there's some other minor other genres like the parables, or like apocalyptic literature. So there's a little bit of other categories, but primarily those three. So what that means is that each one of those have different interpretive principles that must be applied to understand the meaning correctly. Narrative, which Genesis is predominantly narrative, although there's some poetry in the first chapter, and other places too that we also you would want to cherry pick out and understand some principles there. But narrative is the predominant literary style. To do that, you must understand that all narrative has a plot. It has a problem. It has a main character and some sub-characters. It has a climax and a resolution. We're going to see this literally in chapter 1 of the Bible. It's narrative. We're going to see plot, character, climax, resolution. Stay tuned. We're going to be in Genesis 1 for a few weeks. The third principle is that the Bible must be read, love this. The Bible must be read like we think about real estate. What? Real estate, right? What's the most important thing about real estate? Location, location, location. So the most important thing about Bible interpretation, some would say context is king, or context, context, context. Three specific things about context. We must understand the Bible, reading it in the biblical context. That is, how does the Bible interpret the Bible? That makes sense, right? What does one part of the scriptures reflect on another part of the scriptures? So we've got to kind of see the biblical context. How does the Bible interpret the Bible? How did Jesus, his writings, his teachings are in the Bible, how did Jesus interpret Genesis? So we'll look at those things. That's context. The second one is the ancient context. If this was written to the Israelites some 3,000 plus years ago, we must understand what was going on in that ancient context to understand why it was written, what was written, what was the point, what was being addressed. The third one is the situational context. So the ancient one differentiated from situational. Ancient is, what were the people groups around the Israelites? What did they believe about the cosmos, about heaven, about earth, about God or gods, about people and their value or not value, not even value. The ancient, how did the ancients see the world? What was their frame of reference? And the situational is what's going on. They're coming out of bondage of Egypt and they're on their way to the promised land. The situational context, important thing. The third, is that 1, 2, 3? The fourth principle is the Bible was written in a certain language, Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, And what do those words mean? Words matter. Saint Jerome, I think it was Saint Jerome that said, that the meaning of Scripture is embedded in a forest of knowledge. In other words, there's a lot there. Saint Ephrem said, the Scripture is God in a garment of words. I like that. The Scripture is God in a garment of words. In other words, what I'm trying to say is words matter. And for especially the Hebrew authors, words mattered a lot. And when we understand Genesis 1, why it's so important is because the words, the imagery, the symbolism, the metaphors, the icons of Genesis 1 literally go all the way through the Scriptures in every book of the Bible. And to understand what one means in the latter part of the Old Testament, one needs to understand what it meant in the start of the Old Testament. When one wants to understand how Jesus or John or Paul or James thought about a topic, needs to understand how he got that from the very first chapters of the Bible. Words matter. And for the Hebrew authors especially, and the Greek authors, but especially the Hebrew authors, they made their points through repetition of words. So words matter. So look for repetition. I hope this helps, because you and I are going to do all these things. We're going to apply these rules to this text as you and I unpack the story. I'll see you tomorrow.